I wanted to be a doctor and a cheerleader and a writer. And I was just convinced that that was going to be my life, that I could be a cheerleader and a pediatrician and also a writer all at the same time. And so
I think you just invented your new sitcom, Amy.
cheerleading pediatric.
PowerPoints, power lunches, conference calls, reply to all, endless meetings, constant check-ins, and so much wasted time. Are you sick of the BS? So are we. It's time to take our time back, rework the way we work, and make every call a call to action. This is a podcast for people who want to stop talking and really start connecting. This is After 12.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to After 12, 12 for 12's original podcast series that explores cool companies, brands, messages, and makers, and what compels us as fans to take notice and to dig in. We've got a great show for you today, and although I say that every time, I mean it this time. The other times, I was lying. Our guest today is an actress, writer, producer, director, and editor who has appeared in AMC's The Killing, HBO's Family Tree, Netflix Stranger Things, Alien Covenant, and recent remake of Pet Sematary. She also wrote, co-directed, executive produced the Starz series The Girlfriend Experience, based on the Steven Soderbergh film. And she is truly a passionate, driven maker, storyteller, and performer with a bio that I could go on all day. That could be the episode, is her bio. And she helped keep my kids from a life of guns and drugs at an early age. Internet, please join me in welcoming Amy Seimetz to After 12. Amy.
Hi.
Hi.
It's good to see your face.
It's good to see your face. Congrats on the upcoming release of your film, too. She dies tomorrow.
Yes, I'm very excited about it.
Hi. How's the new house?
Good. Can you come over?
I can't. Are you okay?
I am going to die tomorrow.
What is going on?
There is no tomorrow for me.
All right, listen, Amy, I'm really freaking out right now. I feel like you put this idea of dying in my head. Can you just call me back?
You expecting someone?
Hi, Jane.
You okay?
I just have this feeling I'm going to die tomorrow.
But how do you know?
I just know.
Okay, so you don't know.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
I just thought for a second when the lights went out that was it.
She could be right.
What?
You're worried about catching something?
This is how it ends. Something really bad is gonna happen.
I'm ready. She did this. I'm not ready.
What a timely movie title for right now.
Yeah, I mean, I made it in such a bubble and in secret, and it's very strange for it to be coming out during a pandemic when it's about a contagious idea.
Right.
So it's a very strange, surreal sort of experience to have it coming out right now. Yeah.
There's so much meta in movie making. I mean, and right now we're living in truly intense and uncertain times. I mean, we've got the global health crisis, the economic effects of COVID-19, the racial anguish and, hegemony and violent protests caused by, George Floyd's death and previous others. How is all of this affecting you as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, and more importantly, as a human being?
I mean, I do feel like specifically with the protests and everything is that I think we're going to come out on the other side better for it. It's about time, that these issues and that people are, there's solidarity behind these issues, and that people are really standing behind Black Lives Matter and have stopped treating them like this rogue, terrorist group, or mind you, whatever they thought they were, which is really exciting, to see happening and seeing people like standing up against something altogether. And then which is a clash with like coming right out of isolation from quarantine. It's just been this really like manic and sort of wild way where I feel like as a filmmaker, but as a human being and just even as like a citizen of the world, or a citizen of the United States, more importantly right now, is that it's just been a lot of time for like self-reflection of like how you live your life, in quarantine, in isolation, but then also who you are, not just an individual, but who you are as a citizen of your country and as a people. It's a really interesting sort of like morphing time that I feel like my goal right now is not to make assumptions, but to just listen and absorb right now, as opposed to try to put my idea of what's happening onto the situation, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, but you are a deeper thinker. I'm not saying that the lowest common denominator of American isn't. I just this is a reflection point for you, but do you think we've hit an inflection point for, I don't know, the gestalt of our country, the way we come to appreciate what we value? It's like, we talked about this the other day, is I get to spend time with my kids in a way that I never have, or my wife that I never have, or just with myself in a way that I never have. Do you think people will take this and actualize what it could mean, or do you think we're going to go back to like that same kind of ultra capitalist paradigm where it's like, we just become too busy and too self-centered, and we get back to the same way things were that really led to where it is now?
I'm not sure what I don't know. I can't predict the future, but I do feel like there's a paradigm shift in so many, like, that's coupled with the time for self-reflection and the time for remembering what is important, and then mixed with all of this like political unrest and everyone banding together. I think that, whatever side you're on, right or left, I think it's become, I think it's going to be hard to go back to a hyper-capitalist sort of approach to everything, because I feel like people now are really starting to understand how important it is to care about the issues and to be active about the issues, whether that's like at home or, or politically speaking. It'll be really interesting to sort of see, I don't know, how as it's been so polarizing, or it's the politically it's been so polarized. It'll be interesting to see sort of what happens this year with the election. It's sort of like, there's like, I'm dreading it, but I'm also sort of like fascinated to see what evolves from it. But I do see what has been inspiring is people around me, not only during COVID, trying to figure out ways to how to help their community and act locally, but even politically speaking right now, people are starting to get much more interested in like local politics and and thinking more locally of like, who your DA is, who your police chief and sheriff are. It's really, I think people are starting to realize that like it starts in your community, and as opposed to just like every 4 years voting for the president, right, that you can make a change. So I do think that there's a lot of priorities shifting, personally, but also politically speaking. It's interesting to watch.
It is interesting. I mean, it's funny you say like how polarizing it is, because it seems like our tendency as human beings, although we live in all colors and shades and flavors, we end up like bifurcating. We go to two groups. There's a conservative and there's a liberal. There's a Democrat and there's a Republican. There's good and there's bad. And it's like, somebody that explores this in your movies, in your writing. I mean, we're all different shades of gray, right? There's no one or another. I mean, from sexuality to identity, there's we're all on different scales. And the fact that we've globalized to a sense where we've got to bucket everything, we've got to silo everything. It really, I think it undoes us. Which takes me to what you do as a maker. I mean, you're such a scrappy filmmaker, and you started locally. You started in Florida, right? Tell us about like your start and how you got into this love of this medium.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Florida. I did do a semester at NYU, but I went to Florida State and I met all of my Gates, who's helping with the camera, all of my dear friends, Barry Jenkins, Adele Romansky, all of us, and James Laxton, who shoots all of Barry's movies, and David Robert Mitchell, who made It Follows and Myth of Sleepover, and then most recently Under the Silver Lake. Is that the name of it? And so we all were there during the same time. And I didn't go to the film school there. I was doing literature and art history, but I knew I was going to continue to make films. Mm-hmm. And so I worked really closely with the film people in the film school, and would just get my hand, I just wanted to be on set so I could learn, because I was only like 18, 19, So I just would do whatever I wanted, or whatever they needed help with, costume design, production design, all these different ways I could just be on set. And I continued to do that from after I graduated. I moved to San Francisco and then LA and New York. And I just continued to do, whether it was holding a boom or holding a camera, just continued to find different ways to be on set so I could just learn the craft. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't, I always came at it as a filmmaker and a writer. And even when I started acting, it was because I was acting in my own movies because I was cheap and available. And so, free. I was free. And,
and inexpensive, not cheap.
Yeah, not cheap. Yeah, exactly. Inexpensive, meaning free. And then I found that because I was so young when I was first making films, and all my first films I was in, I realized it took me a really long time to admit that I was an actor, because I felt like I was just doing it for the convenience. Convenience factor. But now looking back, I realized that I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I was a filmmaker, the same way I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I was acting in my stuff. So I guess I developed all of those skills at the same time, all together as I was. And you're able to act more in other people's movies than you are as a filmmaker. It's sometimes hard because you don't get to do your craft constantly, it takes money, it takes energy, and but it just takes time. So they all sort of developed all together, and they still, for me as as a writer and a director and as an actor and even producer, they all feed into each other, and each one informs the other in a way. So because I get asked a lot, which one do you prefer? And I don't think I would be able to give up one over the other,
Yeah, I mean, there's a real crew love too when you're on a set with people. There's a camaraderie and a community and just a hangout feel that you get that you. It's hard to explain. I don't think a lot of people, unless they've experienced it, know. So it's interesting that you have been behind the camera, in front of the camera, and have an equal love and reverence for those things. Were you do you remember as a kid saying, when I grow up, I want to work in the movies, or I want to make media?
No, I wanted to be, I think when I was, when the age I was when I was babysitting Jake, your son, when I was 4, I wanted to be I wanted to be a doctor and a cheerleader and a writer. And I was just convinced that that was going to be my life, that I could be a cheerleader and a pediatrician and also a writer all at the same time. And so
I think you just invented your new sitcom, Amy.
cheerleading pediatric. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's pretty good. And so no, I mean, well, I also didn't grow up with artists, you know? So like my parents are my mom's a speech pathologist and my dad was a real estate broker. So it wasn't, so I always knew I wanted to write, but I always thought it was going to be a hobby, you know? I always thought if you get to do it, you have to figure out something else to make money while you're doing the thing that you love.
Yes. The thing on the side, I think that's so funny. My dad was the same way. He's like, you can go to school and study, business or marketing. But I thought I wanted to be an actor until, I started hijacking the scripts, and I was like, I'd probably be an, improv or interview people. I think that's probably easier than actually having to stay on point. But it's funny. I mean, you've worked in all the different departments. You understand the process, which is so few people I really think have that kind of end-to-end understanding. And right now, especially, it's like with the pandemic, I feel like we're living through like a Roland Emmerich disaster movie. For 3 months, movie theaters have been totally shut down, kind of changing that congregational way that we watch things, or that, I don't know, as a writer or a director, if you think about like the audience sitting together, if that's part of your process, but like we're not doing that right now, and everything is kind of streamed into the home, and so you've got more of this solitary approach to whatever it is that you're making. Do you think this is going to be a new normal, or something that as a maker now you have to think about when you're actually shooting?
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold. So like, it's different. When I was making both independent films, like both, I guess I've made 3 now, but I wasn't really thinking about the audience. I was making these movies in a void. I mean, I was making them because I wanted to entertain. I wanted them to be entertaining, but I wasn't necessarily thinking so specifically, because in independent film, you have no idea who, like, I guess in the kind of independent film that I make, but you have no idea what audience it's going to reach. But then when I turned to television, you knew before you wrote that there's going to be an audience, and you knew how they were going to be engaging. And even with the Girlfriend Experience, I knew that they would be on Starz, the channel, but also they were launching their app. So when we were approaching writing, it became part of how we thought about how each episode moved, because it was streaming. Gotcha. And you could watch it as like a movie, essentially.
Was there like marketing support too? I mean, when you do something like that, do you like meet with a marketing director who's saying, okay, this is our demographic, these are the ages that we're going after and the type of content they enjoy watching, so we're going to review your scripts as you're co-writing it? Does that work that way? How does that work?
I'm sure for someone. I mean, I had a very rare experience because Soderbergh went to Starz and said, "What's the amount of money that we could make a show for where you just leave us alone, and there's no notes. You just let these 2 filmmakers, myself and Lodge Kerrigan,
That's great,
do whatever we wanted." And so they gave him a number, and he's like, "Great." And he gave us the number, and he was like, "Now make a show." And it was a pretty low. For television and Union Cruise, it's a pretty low number. But it was still
crazy.
15, more than 15, 20, 30 times the amount of money I had ever had to make a movie myself. So I actually feel like television is a really, is a really easy transition for independent filmmakers, because you're always against the clock. There's never enough money, I think it's almost a better transition from independent film to television than maybe some of the independent films to like these massive studio movies, I just feel like there's a lot more similarity in terms of the machinery and how it works. and it's
Well, because
usually
you have a quicker turnaround time too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like you have to deliver and
there's a quicker
you have to be
turnaround time.
scrappier.
They tend to be more contained. The locations. I mean, there's big budget shows. Obviously like Game of Thrones or something, but still, like they tend to be much more contained. And so you move a lot more like an independent film than you do on these bigger movies. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and that's kind of a real asset to kind of the accidental skill set that you came up with, just being scrappy, like being curious about all these things. I'm curious, like Amy, what do you think about film and TV now in terms of like, okay, for 90 days nothing has been in production, and this shutdown, I mean, it includes my job as like a commercial producer or like corporate videos, but it also includes like major motion pictures, television shows. The only thing that's really happening are podcasts like this. This is why this is happening. I never thought I'd podcast. But how do you think this lull, this 90 days, or whatever continues in this COVID environment, how do you think post-COVID will affect the production process and costs? And do you think more Amy Seimetz scrappy makers will start emerging and popping up?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always say this. I feel like independent filmmakers really love a challenge, and so I feel like my prediction right now, and sort of what I'm feeling right now, not just my prediction, but through talking to other filmmakers and talking to other showrunners and talking to these people, is that a lot of the more scrappy, smaller productions are going to go back before anything else. Because by nature, you have a smaller crew. It's easier to social distance. There's less people on set, and it's a lot more nimble and easier to sort of corral. Like you're not dealing with 100, 150, 200 people on your crew. You're dealing. I mean, if you're making movies like I just did, you're dealing with like 5 people. You can see out your entire crew within your eyesight, and so. So I think it's going to be there's going to be a lot more of that for a while, a lot more independent films going back first. And then I think there's like the bigger budget stuff is going to be really hard when you have all these extras. I mean, it's just an unwieldy thing. So I think it's going to take time. I mean, some of the stuff that I was reading, and I'm curious. Was supposed to go and act on this Soderbergh movie before COVID hit, like actually the week COVID hit, and now he's going to shoot in September. But I'm hearing rumors that like we might have to, before we can shoot, we might all have to quarantine before we can shoot. So there's
together.
There's a lot of like, and I've heard that from several people where it's like if they're going to go into production anytime soon, they all have to like quarantine for 2 weeks before they actually step foot on set. So that obviously costs money, but and then I had these conversations. I had a conversation with Jason Blum too, because I was thinking about maybe making a straight thriller or horror movie, and he was saying the same thing. Is like a lot of the things that they're looking at pushing into production are very contained, like home invasion movies, right? Like so it's all in one,
The genre just blows up because it's all in your
It's all in
house.
one house, yeah, exactly. And then like in movies like Scenes from a Marriage or something, like a Bergman-esque like revival. But yeah, so it's like that's where people's brains are. But I also think the other reason I think it's going to be the more scrappier films is because, independent filmmakers are the ones who, kind of ignore the system. In the system right now, everyone is so used to a way of doing things, and I hear this a lot, and I don't want to knock people individually, but like that they think things are going to go back to normal, and they're just not. Like a lot of executives think that things are going to suddenly go back to normal, and I see it more in terms of like problem solving, or like what the way the film industry is going to look is through people who grew up or developed their careers through this independent way of thinking. So like Soderbergh, even Jason Blum, you know what I mean? You know,
Yeah. Well, he's an interesting one to talk to too. I mean, because he streamed the Hunt, and I'm sure he took a significant, I'm sure there was a loss in terms of revenue from putting that to stream instead of theaters. But at the same time, I mean, you're engaging with your audiences in a whole new way. And on the production side of it, like when you and Gates were doing She Dies Tomorrow, I mean, and you have an intimate group of people, I mean, that's got to help the performer when you're dealing with heavy subject matter and it's more of a psychological thriller or it's an emotional character-driven thing where there's, I mean, if you don't get the intimacy authentic and right in the moment, then your audience now, who's so deft at smelling bullshit, they're going to be like, oh, I'm not interested. And there's also here's the other issue, there's such a demand for content right now. I mean, we are so addicted to content, and I even think of like the short form content, that's coming out with like Quibi or whatever. People just, they're dying. I mean, like, you should see Jake and Maddie now, Amy. I mean, they're like looking at their phones all the time, and it just 25-second, 30-second blocks of content, and it just keeps populating the stream. So I think when it comes to like having a really good long form narrative that's not just like a quick snackable, people need that more than ever. Good storytelling.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I also think it's interesting to see sort of also the format, like you're saying, Quibi, because I think it's like, what are they? They're like roughly like 10 minutes or less than 10 minutes or something, like each episode.
I think so.
It's really interesting to see the format breaking up too, because even when we did The Girlfriend Experience, there weren't a lot of 30-minute dramas on television, and I think the only one that we knew of course, was Stevens. He's gonna sound like a god after I'm done with this, but like
he's pretty close.
He's great, yeah, he's fine. But no, but he had made a show called K Street on HBO that was really good. It actually it's still relevant. It's this couple who are a real life couple that worked for the Clinton administration. Anyways, it's all about politics and behind the scenes sort of politics, and it's really fascinating. But that was a 30-minute format, and he just felt like he can see things that are like coming, and he saw that people were going to be binge watching this show, and he was like, there's something just really bingeable about a 30-minute drama as opposed to usually comedies. And so it's been interesting to see how we consume has affected like the format of what we're doing, because even on Quibi it's like everyone's shooting for vertical.
Totally.
It's sort of blown the doors open of even with movies. People are always like, well, it has to be 90 minutes. It's like, now that we're consuming things in the way that we are, there's no real reason. I mean, obviously theatrical, but there's no real reason for movies to have to be a specific length anymore. It's now sort of like blown the doors open for whatever, like however you want to make a movie or whatever it looks like, or it's really interesting to see happen.
Well, and even the last decade of television, I mean, episodic has just blown me away. I mean, there's so much great content and great thought being put into the scripts, and then the casting. I mean, phenomenal actors of like, every skill level coming out, and really, really interesting topics. Do you kind of have a preference in terms of like, do you like to do episodic, or do you like to have like a long form kind of 90-minute story, end to end kind of packaged, and this is what you get?
I like both, because they both have, with 90 minutes, or like with the film that I just did, you can just like get so intense. Like you can make the tone so intense, like in a way that you can't really get away with it in episodic, because it's so hard to handle that much tone. You know what I mean? Like,
and join us next week.
Yeah. And join us next week for more depressing, intense. Yeah.
Right.
But But I do love what's cool about like episodic is you can go on these tangents that otherwise in this hour and a half you don't have the room. It's so focused and you have to stay so focused. Even if it like is sort of like this like winding narrative, you still have to like really rein it in. Whereas in television, you have the room to be like, I just want to, you know what? I'm going to follow this character now, like for an entire episode. And it's so fun to be able to sort of excavate all of the material and have that room and that space to do that in episodic. So I do like both. I do find they fulfill different, sort of different artistic needs that I have.
Do you think the financial backing will change now because of COVID too? I mean, like in the sense that, for instance, I read, I don't know, you can correct me if this is wrong, but like, Marvel was exploring you talking, about directing Black Widow. And I just wonder, like, the amount of money that some of these corporations have. I mean, each film is like, an LLC that lasts 3 years and has, upwards of, $500 million production value, depending on what the film is. Do you think that'll change? Do you think, people are going to, or companies that underwrite these films are going to start to say, you know what, I want to take a chance on something now because I'm worried about, all of the loss of revenue. For instance, I'm sure the studios were hit huge. I mean, this past 90 days, has probably caused a major shortage of revenue, and they're not going to make their numbers. Does this give an advantage to the scrappy, young new filmmaker?
I mean, I think on some level, but I also I don't mean this in a pessimistic way, but also people are so risk adverse, and I don't think that I think people are so risk adverse that they're gonna want to hold on to whatever level of normalcy that they think they can predict at the box office, So like I think that they're gonna still want to make these like tentpole movies because they're guaranteed to make money. I don't know when they're going to be able to go back into production, so that's the only thing that's going to like drive them to invest in a different kind of movie, is because I don't know when those like Marvel movies are going to be able to go back.
Right. And you talk about big crews, big locations, big budgets. I mean, last week Hollywood Studios released the guide to reopening film and TV production post-COVID, and it's like auditions behind plexiglass, staggered crew meals, frequent testing, compliance officers for coronavirus. I mean, is this tenable on top of everything else too? I mean, just for instance, taking a prop and having to contain a prop so that it's not passing virus, or pathogen on it.
I think that's where, they're going to have to, I think that's where unions are going to really have to step in, you know what I mean? And it's in terms of like the sections, like being really much stricter than they already are about like, you cannot touch, this department stuff. Like it just has to be that way. Like it just has to be sort of organized. Like there needs to be some mandate from the unions, and they're also not just from the productions themselves, but like all the unions need to come in and sort of mandate exactly how they feel they're going to be able to protect their workers, right? And I think that will be really helpful for even the smaller productions, is to sort of follow the lead of like what the unions are doing, and then reversely like what the independent films are doing. But I do think it's tenable, but it has to be on I still think it's going to be on these smaller productions, because it's so much easier to regulate that stuff, to be able to, like, if I can see in my eyesight the crew, if I can see where they are, like sort of in proximity, then it's easier for me to be like, for everyone to feel comfortable that everyone's following the rules, as opposed to who knows who brought in XYZ, like
Yeah.
the props or the costumes or, whatever.
Well, I mean, the silver lining to that, you're talking about quarantining with Soderbergh's new film. I mean, think about it. Like, if you had to quarantine with the other performers that you were with, the level of rehearsal, of, intimacy in terms of trust, getting to know the actor on a personal level, and then being able to explore new angles, and that kind of sounds like it could be a real benefit to the actual story, right?
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's the fun part about it too, is that you get to you kind of bond. you're gonna
You get
have
to hang out
bond.
with Benicio for a month or two before you actually start shooting. I was like,
Yeah, and
that
hopefully
doesn't suck.
George Clooney too.
Yeah, totally. Yes. All of Steven's friends sound like that would be really cool, and just the learning, the mind share. Again, in any business, you learn by experience. You learn hands on, and you get these little trinkets of information from everybody you meet. And it's especially when you're with experts in their field. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm actually the one thing I'm curious about is I wonder if for the next 3 years, and this is just a prediction because I think it's funny, but it's not funny. It's funny, it's not funny. Is that I wonder if anyone if we just won't see kissing in a movie for 5 years. Just nobody's kissing. It's
you're not seeing it here in my house.
Bollywood.
Why don't you kiss me anymore?
Yeah, like Bollywood movies, it was just recently that they allowed to show kissing on screen. So I'm really curious what that's gonna do. It might just be that nobody kisses in a movie for a very long time, or has any physical interaction.
Or you get the insurance companies to get body doubles who have signed away their lives to be the kissing doubles.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you do? I'm a professional kisser.
They're when they go in for a kiss, it just cuts to a really big wide, and or they're just
Or you get,
digital avatars.
Anatomical head,
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Doll heads to kiss. Oh my gosh, that's hysterical. I mean, let me ask that question. As an actress, would you want to kiss somebody that you had?
That's the thing. I mean, you would want guarantees, right? You would want to know, has this person been recently tested? Has all of these factors that go in, the testing, obviously being tested, very recent up into that, to those moments. But yeah, or I don't know. Who knows what the antibody test is? Nobody knows.
Right.
Nobody knows anything. That's sort of part of why it's all so scary. But yeah, I mean that's a really difficult sort of because I mean in the film coming up, I'm playing somebody's wife, and so it's we have to play husband and wife. So it's interesting, but maybe maybe it's a character choice that we just don't have that level of intimacy.
We just become a puritanical society in our content. I love that. I think that could be. Well, I mean, we've definitely hit a new or next normal. I don't, it's not like this is unprecedented because the Spanish flu in 1918 had similar things, but we just didn't have such a media-driven, addicted, content-consuming society back then. So I don't know. It's anyone's guess. At the same time, Amy, I have to imagine, as somebody that has got the gears constantly turning, what have you been working on during quarantine? Have you been writing ideas? Have you been kind of getting meta and thinking, oh, this is a cool topic to actually explore some things in this weird pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything, it's actually I've had to go back to certain TV shows I was writing to do because they're current shows. So they take place currently. So I had to go back and do sort of a pass where it was post-COVID. Or now that I have this knowledge, being okay, this has to change because one of them's almost like a travel log sort of show. And
so you're actually introducing right now into the narrative the reality of okay, wow.
And then so it's kind of two, or I guess it's multi-pronged in a way where it's like the content, if you're making something modern day, you know, it has gotta, it doesn't have to like be about COVID, but like acknowledging it in some sort of form is on my mind, like creatively. But then there's also on the production end of like how to actually execute something, which also for me, I always like writing stuff, or whenever I write something, I always like writing stuff that I know I can execute or I know will get made, whether that's if I independently do it myself or if I'm providing it to like a network or whoever is like I can talk them through how we can execute something. So inevitably for me, the producing and the execution of it inevitably affects the content, you know?
Sure.
So yeah, I mean that's and so yeah, a very contained, almost home invasion like script I am writing. Almost, it's not really, but
it kind of returns you to your roots, where like everybody's just in a house, like, hey, we have a camera, let's shoot this week. Okay, let's make a movie.
Yeah, two people in a room. That's it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those are often like the best stories, though, too. Right. You know, it's like it really relies on the strength of the character interaction, the quality of the script and the story. And I do like the idea of like even, you know, being a fly on the wall and seeing a small production, because then you know everyone is really engaged. Yeah. Where if you have like 150 people on set and it's noisy and it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't have that same family gestalt, you know?
Right. I mean, that's, yeah, you know everyone that's on the set. You know, it feels more like a family. And I also think, you know, in terms of my favorite stuff, it's like, whether it's imposed, like self-imposed rules or boundaries, or the sort of nature of it, and because you either don't have money or because, you know, you don't have time. All of those boundaries, I always find make it better because it gives it direction. You know, like it's like part of direction is like sort of whittling things away to like to shape something, and sometimes the conditions can help sort of focus the direction in a very specific way. You know, like, you know, sometimes I happen to love it when I have very, very tight boundaries, because I feel like as a director, it makes my job easier.
Sure.
Because I only have totally like one choice. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, choice is tragic. If you have too much to think about, then it's too inspecific, and you just go all over the place, and you don't know where the thing's going to go. There's a lot of books like that, and it's just like you're in the middle of the book. You're like, I have no idea where this book is going. Well, let me ask you, you know, because you, as an actress, as a writer, as a producer, as a director, you're often pitching your stuff, your stories. Has this changed kind of like the nature of what you want to pitch going forward? And are there any things that have come out of this COVID kind of quarantine reality that like didn't exist before, that you're like, I have this great idea now and I think it will work, and it would have never worked before, kind of thing?
You know, I'm not necessarily anything specifically. Not anything specifically, but there's two things I've been thinking. Well, one, with the film that I have coming out, it's really wild because it's a, how would I explain it? Like an absurdist horror film in a way. It's like very funny, but it's also like, it's a horror film, and it's about contagion, and when I was making it, there was a moment where I was like, is anyone gonna understand what's happening? Because the way that it's contracted or spread is, if you say I'm gonna die tomorrow, then the person that you told that to, they then think they're gonna die tomorrow, and so I wasn't sure how sort of obtuse that was. But then when it was supposed to play at South by, now when people watched it, they just immediately got it and thought it was like, you know, that like I had predicted the future or something, and like And so I have no idea. I have no idea what it would have been like to have people watch it pre-COVID. Like, I have no idea if they would actually get it. You know what I mean? It's very strange, and I'm just going to admit that. But like,
I'm using COVID as a marketing plan
Yeah.
for my movie.
yeah, no, ooh, no.
No, but I mean, it's funny. It's funny that you say that. It's like, COVID-19 is a virus. It's the CNN campaign maybe it's Washington Post campaign that says misinformation is a virus. And it kind of reminds me of Leonardo DiCaprio's line in Inception, like, an idea is the most powerful virus. And I love the fact that the coincidence is there. It's a little eerie. It's very meta, but it could work.
Yeah, it was mostly about that. It was mostly about the how just sort of on the right and left, how like hysteria of like getting like the right like riled up and the left riled up, and like just in these ways that were so contagious and getting everyone sort of like crazy. And then I also noticed, even just personally, that like my own anxiety, if I would let myself sort of go overboard, then like I would talk about my anxiety and it would just like get even worse, and then I'd tell somebody else, and then they'd be worried about me. You know what I mean? And then it's like,
yes, and then you're refilling your Ativan prescription. Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
So, but going back to the other question is the one thing I've been thinking about is, because everyone's consuming so much content, that there's something really interesting that I've been thinking about is like, as opposed to like quarantine has made me think about this, as opposed to like going so like flashy and like big and like outward and like to like market to people. I think like sort of pitching a really simple show, like something that's very, very simple. Like right now, all of my friends were like flipping out about Normal People. Have you watch that?
Yeah,
it's like teenagers.
Yeah.
It's so simple.
Very simple.
And so I feel like that's another thing that I've been thinking about, is like pitching something that's just like super simple, not just because of the times and then you can have two characters and the conditions and whatever, but also because I feel like people, because of the way they're consuming, it is this intimate sort of relationship that you can get away with simplicity a little more than you can previously.
I think that's a very deft observation. I mean, like, if you just had a show that was a series of pictures of people hugging, I think you'd get an Emmy. You know
Right?
what I mean? Like, right now, yeah. I think returning to simple and honest and truth.
Yeah.
I mean, what we know of truth has been obscured so much. And again, like, polarization has... I mean, are people really this polarized, or is it what we see? I mean, because when you have a conversation with somebody that like believes something differently than you, and you have actually you have a face-to-face like intellectual argument that you share your ideas, and you do it in a way that that protects the other person, that is not blame-based or anger-based. I mean, so much of like what we do now is trolling under the anonymity of social media, that we have these profiles, these digital identities. I mean, and you must experience it too. I mean, like, as somebody that's on camera that does like a major motion picture, you do all these press junkets, and you have to, there's a certain like performative Amy. You've got to go out and you got to sell the thing, and then like, you want your private life, like, totally, I don't want to be a public person when I have to be a public person for work. But now it's like everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame, the Warhol thing. I mean, they've got their, Instagram accounts, and they've got their podcasts, and they've got their it's very important. It's become like the cult of personality, and it's made us, I think, really guarded from what's truth, and like how do you share truth. It's a real complex kind of situation right now, especially with...
Have you listened to the New York Times podcast Rabbit Hole?
I haven't, no.
It's all about that. It's really fascinating. It's part of it's like a a special that, you know, that the New York Times, the daily that they do, where it's like they have the daily sort of news stories. It's a special that they did called Rabbit Hole, and it's all about sort of everyone having YouTube channels, and then these kids getting addicted to like TikTok, and like how you can get like sort of into these like, you know, Richard Spencer like ideas through YouTube, and YouTube, their algorithm is suggesting these things, and it's really fascinating. But it goes through like this series of like different people that they talk to, who like get sucked into these like, you know, YouTube wormholes, and like get sucked in and get sort of radicalized in a way, or like believe in Pizzagate, or believe in, you know,
Flat
like
Earth.
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
And then, or just like say really horrific, like 4chan or 8chan or whatever, and say really horrific things about women, or and how they can start to become like indoctrinated into these ideas by watching these people who have these internet personalities who are quote unquote speaking the truth.
Oh yeah, I mean, Vice did a whole thing on QAnon, and I was just like,
exactly. They get into QAnon, yeah.
I mean, I'm glad I do boring corporate marketing shit, because I don't have the time for that. On top of that, I just like, man, I think as a humanity, as a society, we need to spend more time connecting. And I know I'm saying this as I'm staring into a camera lens and not your face, Amy, but it's like, I love doing this because I want to talk to people. But I mean, I'll tell you, when I interview people, I'd rather be in like sitting next to them, having a glass of rosé, or, you know, like being able to feel their energy. And I think so much of that mediation and so much of that understanding of camera and screen, and this screen age that we live in, is divisive. It is a part of the problem. You know, that there, and again, it bifurcates. There's one side versus the other, and there aren't two sides. There are like 1,000 sides, millions of sides.
You know who's gonna save the world? Which I've also binge watched during quarantine. I've watched
Dave Chappelle.
No, well, he's one. He should team up with Queer Eye guys, because like they are so good at exactly what we're talking. I'm not kidding. I want to just be around them all the time, because they're just spreading joy and understanding like everywhere across the world. But they do a really good job. I mean, and like the new episodes, but they really do. They do a good job, because they go to the South, and they like go places that like, you know, that are usually anti-gay, but they have these really beautiful, touching episodes where they like sort of connect to exactly what you're talking about, like connect to people that they otherwise wouldn't have. Like one was like a cop, and they're really honest, but it's anyways. I love that show so much, but it brings me so much joy, because I'm like, oh, like everyone can have a conversation and understand each other if you just bring these fabulous gay men like to redo their home and wardrobe.
Yes,
like,
yes, I know. It's as a former resident of Palm Springs who, went to many parties with caftans as the uniform. I have to tell you, like, I think we need that right now. I think we need a little sparkle. We need a little glitter. We need less anger, less hate. Definitely less automatic assault rifles. And more conversations like this. And Amy, I'm so happy to reconnect with you, and I hope that we can do this in person.
yes.
Because this, I mean, you wouldn't have to kiss me. I'd wear a mask, and I'd even quarantine with you. But thanks, Gates, too, behind the camera there, pal. I appreciate it. So I guess just to close, where can we find your movie, and when can we watch it?
It will be dropped around, I mean, this date might change, but it will be sometime around August 7th. I will double check that with you before you put this out, but it's, I am told, August 7th. And it will be dropped online, like pretty much like everywhere.
So it'll be streamed, and it's a neon film.
It's a neon film, which I'm very excited about.
Now, is this the first time you've ever dropped a film via screening? Streaming? Is this going to be kind of a new experience for you?
No, I mean, I did with Sunshine. I did it. I had New York, LA, and then like maybe Chicago for a week or something. But and then it dropped on iTunes. But and it's streamed a little bit. Oh, and also Sun Don't Shine, I just found out is going to be Criterion's going to re-release it around the same time. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah. So
Exciting.
yeah. So I'm very excited about that too.
Oh, that's awesome. Amy, thank you so much for being on After 12. It's lovely seeing you, and I can't wait to see you in person.
Thank you so much. All right.
All right.
All right.
Bye.